If we do get into deep water, you should consider, legal advice at the very forefront, because they're fighting for their own policy rights, not you. And they need to know what's considered bad faith settlement and the time frames involved. I mean, all that needs to be worked out at the forefront. There should be an expectation of when the job is finished, how much time to get paid, because if the contractor has to take out a loan, that to me is a cost of doing business. I mean, how can you run your business if you're short, if they shortchange you on a job, or if they don't pay you at all?
From humble beginnings, Insurance Claim HQ has grown to one of the largest property casualty firms in the country. We didn't do it alone, and you shouldn't either. Every week, we're talking to claims professionals and top experts from all over, all to help you grow your business and make you stronger. Let's level up together. I'm Galen Hare. Welcome to the Level Up Claims Podcast.
Are you tired of jobs going sideways because of fights over estimates? Is Xactimate frustrating to you? Do you know a lot about Xactimate, but you're still not getting the right results? Well, there's a reason for that, and it largely has to do with education and an understanding as to how Xactimate works. Today, we're really excited to welcome our guest, Todd Beckman. He's a lead trainer at Xactimate Mastery, and he used to work for Xactimate itself. We're going to scratch the surface because, as you know, this could take hours. But let's join us with Todd and let's figure out how to up our game in Xactimate. Todd, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
So man, over 25 years of experience as a building contractor, and you also have been an insurance adjuster, right?
That's right, yeah.
What compelled you to go through this crazy route in life?
Well, it was by accident, actually. We went through that mortgage debacle, back in 2018, which I had two businesses going on at that point. I was a home inspector and a private fee paid home inspector, and I was a general contractor. So I was bringing in six-figure from my home inspection business, and I was also doing two major projects a year. And when that mortgage debacle hit us, I lost my house and everything in my business. So one of the inspections I did, the fellow was an insurance adjuster. And so he advised me to get into insurance adjusting. So I got my independent adjuster license and went off to a cat storm, lost my butt, came back. And then I had to use Xactimate. So I went to their facility, which is real close to where my parents live in Utah. I was living in New Mexico at the time, long story longer. And they had a job posting. So I actually got a job from Xactware as their regional trainer, United States and Canada. And it paid dirt, but during that time it was like, this is good, but it's not really that great. So I voiced my opinion. They didn't want to give me a raise. I was like, I'm out of here. So then I got into my daughter. At the time, we had talked to a contractor. No, he's a contractor and an adjuster out of Colorado. He was in the same organization that I was. I was hired by AAA Insurance. And so one of the adjusters out of Colorado says, hey, why don't you go to work as a supplementer? Not before I left, I had Alina, my daughter, and my wife, Elise, actually engage with that industry. And so they became really proficient at supplementing. They started their own company, and then we got into training. And that's when I pulled in and became the lead trainer and chief cook and bottle washer.
Fair enough. Chief cook and bottle washer. That's interesting. So, I totally get that. And I do think often like a crisis kind of makes an opportunity, right? And it sounds like you kind of turn that mortgage crisis into, okay, I got to do something else. What was it like working directly for Xactware?
That, because they just got purchased by a big corporation, surprisingly, and this is the first thing I look at as a pay, they cut the pay in half when they got bought out by Verisk for the trainers. So it was $90K a year, then it dropped to 45, and that's when I got hired. So not a lot of incentive to travel 3 weeks out of every year, 3 weeks a month out of every year. And when you were back at the office, now that they got bought out, they wanted you to do double duty. So you're home, but they wanted you to do other things, big projects. And it was like, this is just too much for the pay. But it was frustrating because big corporation and my ideas, I had some really good ideas, which I think they're trying to develop right now for additional uses of their software in the industry. And so they're getting to that, but it's like, I don't know, big corporations like suck the life out of you. I mean, I'll be honest.
How interesting though. Like when you think about it, really. So you went to work for Xactware, a huge company. They'd just been purchased. And I think that's like an inflection point for businesses, right?
Yeah.
It's an acquisition, a merger, anything large like that. And you kind of have a choice to make. Do you want to double down on your people and the things that you think made the company worthwhile? Or do you think something else about the company was worth it, such as the technology, right? So do
Right.
you kind of abandon those people? And, without knowing all the facts, like it sounds like the choice was made that the people weren't really worth it. So they were going to cut those rates. They were going to cut those salaries. They didn't care. They didn't mind
Yeah.
overworking them. For them, they probably saw it as purely buying a software.
And a lot of it was my side too, for making double that amount in the private sector and then going to work for somebody else. There just wasn't that much incentive to continue.
So you have just seen a lot because you've been a contractor forever and now you've been on the insurance side. So let's talk a little bit about contractors for a minute. So like when a contractor comes out, what do you think, like especially in the insurance context, what kind of things should the contractor be communicating to the homeowner even before the work gets started?
Yeah. There has to be a recognition that the payment is going to come from a third party. In the case it's coming through the homeowner, but the homeowner typically is led to believe that the insurance company has their interests at heart, and they don't. That's the problem. Is they get all these advertisements about being a good neighbor and you're in good hands and all that. What they don't realize is that the the insurance companies are operating on a whole different set of rules. They've changed the rules, and that the homeowner is going to be in the payment to the contractor is going to be delayed. It's going to be denied most of the time. And then it's going to be, if they can push you into court, they'll go to court over it. They always lose for the most part, but that's their strategy. Whereas my father's insurance, in fact, when I was an adjuster and I worked for AAA, we paid everything, overhead and profit, everything right in regardless of the number of trades or anything. We were very fair. But the only downside to that was that they only allowed so much time for you to take care of the claim. In our case, they wanted it done in 24 hours, 2.3 of those done and paid in the field. And it's just not possible, especially in where I was working up in Utah. They brought me to that area, and they have usually big houses, multiple stories and basements. So if you have a toilet overflow on the upper level, you got, three areas, three floors of the house that you have to do a takeoff on. And there's no way to finish 2.3 a day traveling 5 hours to get there. So that's the side that I think most people, contractors, need to know, is that the adjusters are overworked, usually underpaid, but they're overworked and they can't get the scope right. So don't deal so much with the field adjuster, deal with the inside owning adjuster. And that's, in fact, I've got so first thing is get to know about policy, understand what policy promises. And that should be our first point where you're interfacing with the homeowner, that you do need a copy of the policy. Now, in some states, they can't even read it, but other states, they should read it together with the homeowner so that they can understand who's going to pay for what. So if you have an RCV policy, but it doesn't have code upgrade, and you see that it needs more ventilation or ice and water shield or what have you, you need to confront the homeowner about who's going to pay that. Now, you can offer financing, but we need to know what the policy pays for first thing. See, so that's a first order of importance. So I would say get yourself educated in insurance policy. Not that you're going to two things you want to stay away from. One is interpreting policy, and the other
you're
one
not
is
suggesting arguing policy. You're just suggesting knowing it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you don't want to interpret it, and you don't want to represent the client. You just want to know where your money's coming from. It's that simple, right? So,
and why? You want to know why, even if you're not telling the homeowner why.
We're going to get paid, because if the insurance company is involved, they're going to try to underpay, and that goes back to the state statutes about what's considered unfair claim settlement practices, and good definitions in each state. Underpaying the claim, not doing the proper research, denying the claim without proper investigation. There's a lot of things in there that I think the homeowner needs to be apprised of right at the very front. This is what our state says and we would like to, help you in this, staying in our lane, but you have to basically hold your insurance company responsible and watch them, because they might veer off the course, which makes both of our lives painful, right?
Yeah, no, 100%. Now, I do want to dig in on that a little bit. I don't want to focus our whole podcast on it, but this is an often dispute that comes up, and it's a huge controversy, right? Which is, you'll see like on the Facebook's like the devil, guys, because the carrier defense attorneys are on those groups, even if you think they're not, like under aliases. But I see these contractors all day post, oh, like, this policy, that policy. And often what you'll see is people come back and be like, well, you shouldn't even be looking at the policy because
Yeah.
you're the contractor. I disagree with that statement. I
Yeah.
think you should look at the policy and you should absolutely know what it says. Sounds like you agree.
100%. No, that's really where the rubber meets the road, because then you can diagnose. I would even surmise, we have a contractor checklist in our membership where you can go through and ask the questions, are you the named insured? Are you a tenant? And get to the bottom of who I'm talking to in the first place. And then we need a certified copy of that policy, because we want to find out what your policy is going to cover, if it's all perils or it's named perils, if it is an ACV or an RCV, if you do have ordinance and law or not, because these issues come up on a routine basis, and it's just a matter of practice to get these ironed out at the very forefront. That way we'll have a real smooth transaction. The second thing is the contractors need to realize it's like a blind spot that they have. They don't really understand insurance. They really know where to go with it. They just plow ahead like it's a retail engagement, and it's anything but. And their blind spot is they don't have the tools to do the job. So we've kind of created what we would call maybe not only contractors checklist, but a claims toolbox, where you have to have the right technology stack, the tech stack, to address everything that comes up. So we love one-click code is out there. You have to have a good CRM and to keep everybody in line in your organization. Job Nimbus is a good one. There's others out there. Ego View for your pre-engagement. We'd like to get the estimate written even before you can meet with the contractor or the client, because if you're prepared, you send it through their email. The adjuster gets it ahead of time, which is what they prescribe in their statement. When they send out their homeowners policy notification, it's always like, oh, if your contractor disagrees with our estimate, which they always will, then you need to send it to our representative, which is an internal owning adjuster. So if you can get the strategy worked out ahead of time, you can have pretty smooth sailing. But when it gets to rough waters, in some states you have an assignment of benefit, which you can actually have the homeowner sign, and then you can take control, go to appraisal, or hire the attorney yourself, which is surprising. And in some states,
careful with that one though, right?
Yeah.
So let's take a quick aside, just because I think your advice makes sense. It's good, but we've seen a lot of things play out, right? So if you take an assignment of benefit in a state where you're entitled to, and you hire an attorney, please hire that attorney in your name, not the insured's name, because the insured did not hire the lawyer. And that will just lead to a nightmare. It blew up in Louisiana. It created all these problems. And I don't know that anyone's intent was actually bad, but it definitely played out badly. So sorry, keep going. I just wanted to make sure we got that out.
Well, and there's a difference between an assignment of claim and assignment of benefit too. Assignment of claim, you can get deep water, but I just visited the state of Colorado, and they can use that assignment of benefit. That is, like you say, the contractor, and hire the attorney in his name, the contractor's name, you're right. And that can work well for you. But I think apprising also the homeowner of, if we do get into deep water, you should consider, legal advice at the very forefront, because they're fighting for their own policy rights, not you. And they need to know what's considered bad faith settlement and the time frames involved. I mean, all that needs to be worked out at the forefront. There should be an expectation of when the job is finished, how much time to get paid, because if the contractor has to take out a loan, that to me is the cost of doing business. I mean, how can you run your business if you're if they shortchange you on a job, or if they don't pay you at all? And that's probably the best time to get an attorney involved, because non-payment is a huge issue. But to get these things settled up front is what I'm driving at. But you have to be organized, right? And then as it passes from the salesperson to the project manager and through the organizational structure, it needs to be organized so everybody knows where everybody's at. And with insurance, it's going to be data migration. All this data you get at the forefront, which is imperative to get the claim settled fast, needs to be passed along to each department. Oh, did you realize we replaced 3 sheets of sheathing and we didn't bill the insurance company for it? That happens all the time. There's so much money that's left on the table because of non-interdepartmental communication. So organizationally, you have to get ready for it. This isn't a retail job. You have to bill that insurance company for, damages that were caused by that event, or unnailable surfaces, non-nailable surfaces. The structure has to be in place.
That's the thing. You have to know. So I'm glad we talked about that because I think it is important. I do think people some of them conflate it on purpose, but they conflate like knowing policy with arguing policy. Don't argue policy as a contractor. Don't represent the policyholder as a contractor. You just write your estimate and do the work. But do know what you're getting yourself into. Like, look at that policy. And if there's no hail or wind coverage and you're out there for a hail or windstorm, don't waste your time, right? Like, I'm not saying you should give them advice as to what's covered or not. I actually wouldn't. And I know that sucks to be looking at a policy where there's no coverage and not tell these poor people that they don't have coverage. Like, advise they talk to a public adjuster and attorney to take a quick look, and move on. But do not waste your time, right? Because there's nothing there. And on the flip side, you need to know what the coverages are. So you make sure you're very clear in your wording on your estimate, right? If ordinance and law is not covered, I'm not saying change your estimate, but I'm saying don't accidentally use words that imply that things are ordinance and law as opposed to actually being like a necessary repair for the damage.
I think also too, your contractual relationship with your homeowner needs to be vetted by a state approved attorney, to get that just right for your state. You got to start off on a solid grounding, and that's imperative. And any other additions to like your if you want to go over overhead and profit, if you are a general contractor, and of course the white papers from Exactware say that if you sub out your work, you are a general contractor. To get that worked out at the forefront would be nice too, because with the software usage, that is Xactimate, they say that overhead and profit is not included in that line item price, but there's a space for it, for overhead and for profit, for general contractors. And they further go on to define what a general is. So a lot of these guys aren't getting paid overhead and profit just because the insurance company thinks they are just subcontractors. They consider them as subcontractors. And then they come up with all these number of trades and all this other BS. But at the end of the day, if you got, in the state of Tennessee, I noticed they have the Sixth Court of Appeals said that if you have more than one subcontractor in that state, you're considered a general, or if it's above 25,000, which is above their license for just a regular tradesman. We call it the guy that can do the work up into a certain point, handyman license. Okay. When you hit 25,000 above, you have to have a general contractor. So that's what they specified in their Court of Appeals to receive the overhead and profit. So it's important to understand Xactimate as well, because that's the software they're using. So if we use a common database for our pricing, we should use it as intended. And that's where they have the white papers. So they have to be educated in the white papers too, because they can press that point. In fact, if they can find an internal person in claims department that is certified level 1, 2, or 3, that's the person they want to talk to, because then they will honor the white papers. Whereas the rest of the crowd, they don't know diddly. So,
And let's talk about it. With the white papers, you're talking about probably two main white papers. You're talking about the overhead and profit white paper, and you're talking about the pricing methodology white paper. Fair?
Roofing prices in Xactimate is really the quintessential paper, because it actually spells out for one single trade who they consider to be a general contractor. So I don't know if I could send that to you or put it in a chat or something, but I can get that to you if you'd like, like a copy.
Definitely shoot it over. We'll put a link to it in the notes. We'll upload it to our server. So some of these white papers, they're so fascinating, right? Because the pricing methodology white paper could not be clearer.
Right.
That the pricing is for informational use only and shouldn't be relied on by anyone.
Yeah. The end user license agreement, I would add to that, says that when you receive this price list, it's historical at best. So they've done the research 2 or 3 weeks ago. Then they published a price. Well, prices could have gone up. So they said it's historical, and it's up to the estimator to determine if that is usable in their market. So it says that do not inhibit the contractor from changing the price if market conditions or other demands, are involved. So it actually puts the estimator in the driver's seat to say, yeah, this is 2 hours out of my normal work area. I have to charge for travel time, maybe meals, maybe gas expenses, maybe hotels. All of that is admissible, and all of that is justified. And that's where the contractors lose it too, because they don't keep track. You have to tell the narrative. Everything has to be reasonable, right? And I always say it needs to be on a job, you do what's required and necessary. Well, required is you follow OSHA standards, manufacturer specifications, Your code with amendments, because a lot of times the code will say, yeah, R60 in the ceiling, but we've adopted only, we're going to adopt R49, right? That's what they did in where I live. And I'm a general contractor, so I follow that stuff. But if you can tell a narrative, they'll buy it more often than not because you've done your due diligence to keep track of all the steps you've taken to restore that person back to pre-loss condition. And that's what they need. They need the narrative. And if you go to court, they love the narrative. Every little thing, every little step that you took and is documented. That's the way they should keep track of insurance work. I don't care about retail. Retail, you pound the last nail, you go for your check, you get it, you're done. But insurance is that's the blind side. That's a blind spot that every contractor has. They need the tools of the trade. They need to be organized. They need to educate the homeowner at the very forefront about what to expect, even to the standpoint of, I'm the salesperson. We've just made a deal and I'm going to pass you off to the next in line, who might be the project manager, might be the scheduler, but get the name and get the association of people involved so they feel comfortable, and then give them kind of a preview of what you expect to happen on their job site. And you can limit them too to calling you just maybe, hey, we're going to update you maybe every Wednesday, instead of having the owner call out all the time. Hey, where are we on, driving you crazy. You can set the tone for things right at the very forefront. We're going to be contacting you on Wednesday at this time and give you an update or whatever, and keep them in the loop. And then use that homeowner to send the emails through, because when you start getting on your own, then you're getting further away from the contractual relationship that's there. So you need to stay together with the homeowner all the time and have them fight for you. If they don't, then get that AOB, right? Because you can immediately go to appraisal, or like you said, hire the attorney yourself. And that's a powerful point to be in. Colorado, they can do that, I know. But you have to vet the homeowner first. The homeowner has to be vetted. Do they want to, participate in this and see it through, or do they want to just wash their hands of the whole thing? And, that's where you have to decide whether that's a good match for your business, right?
I could not agree more. You have to figure out if it's a good match for your business. You have to figure out what you want to do, like what your next step is, right? And not every homeowner, just because they have a roof that's damaged, does not make them the right client, right?
Right.
Do you trust them? Do they have it in them to stick it out? Like, these are all important things that I think we tend to forget because we're so focused on the next sale,
And that's it. The difference between revenue and profit, really, you can't go for the numbers. Revenue will feed your ego, but profit will feed your family,
I love that. So let's talk a little bit about, because we started talking about this white paper stuff, and it's so fascinating because I think, anyone at home that works in claims, like, they kind of have ideas about this stuff, but have they really dug in? So let's talk about this. That's the cost of doing business argument, right?
Right.
See that all the time. Oh, we need a porta potty. Well, that's the cost of doing business. You need a porta potty.
Yeah.
What do you say to that from an Xactimate standpoint?
Clearly, in the white papers, that pricing methodology plus the couple other papers I mentioned, they make a distinction between what's general overhead, your business, your depreciation on your tools, your heating, your light, your employees, all the benefits involved in running your business, as opposed to a direct job expense. So anything that's going to go to that job, supervision, porta potties, all that, is outlined in their white papers as a direct job expense. And that's where the overhead and profit needs to be added. And you're doing business as a business, not as a giveaway program. So their papers are essential because they define the difference between what's general overhead and what is direct job expense. And then they have overhead on labor, which is included because their survey, there's another paper you need. The survey that they send out to contractors shows you very the forefront. It says, we want these figures to be filled out in these columns specifically. Leave off your general overhead and profits to be added later. They're giving you instructions as how to use the software. And of course, the insurance side wants to take advantage of your ignorance and just say, no, we're not going to give you any overhead and profit. Well, why are you in business if you're not making overhead? You're covering your overhead and you're not making a profit. That reduces you down to just wages. And that's not what, the software is intended for. And it's a nice thing for the homeowner to understand that you're using the same software as the insurance company. So there's no need to get 3 estimates. You're using the same price list, right? Why would you want to get 3 estimates? This is what insurance pays. So that's what we're going with. They corralled us into using the software. Now we're using it, and we're going to use it insofar as it follows the market pricing, because you always have to check it against the market. So they have that caveat in there. But yeah,
well, that's exactly right. And like that's the cost of doing business thing is wild to me, because everything is the cost of doing business. General overhead and specific overhead are all the cost of doing business. Every dollar you spend as a business owner is part of the cost of doing business. That doesn't mean you don't get to recover it, right?
Yeah, and here's another little factoid. You can go to Inside Xactimate in the estimating side of it, estimate items, and it tells you what's considered supporting events. They allow 1 hour drive time. Well, I took a supplement the other day and I looked down and goes, where's this guy's in Utah, but oh man, he's like an hour and a half away. We need to add some drive time to this. He's driving that distance, an hour and a half times 2, that's 3 hours. Well, it says in supporting events, they've allowed for only 1 hour drive time. So there's a justification. Tell the narrative. Look, they hired us out of here. We had to drive to this remote location to do the job. We've incurred these costs. You keep you keep all of your details, your notes about your job, a journal, and then you tell the narrative and get it paid. Otherwise, you're just going, oh no, we're only allowing, so much time. And it's like, no, the owner hired me, right? And I'm out of this district and we had to travel 2 hours. So having a knowledge of what supporting events consists of, how many breaks, how long for breaks, drive time, pick up materials time, clean up at the end of the job, all of those, and what they're aiming for in Xactware, Verisk now, is for the average job. Well, if I have a job on a hillside, that's not an average job, right? Average job is just general everyday kind of job. Well, this one, we've got high impact shingles. We've got to, use a lift to get it up, and we got scaffolding to dress the soffit and the fascia. So it's what's required and necessary for that project. And it has to be reasonable, right? If it goes before a jury, that's all they ask, what is reasonable?
I'm so glad you said that, because you really hit on the overarching issue that people don't pay attention to. Xactimate is the average based on the data Xactimate collects. It's not the highest, it's not the lowest, which means you're allowed to be higher and you're certainly allowed to be lower. The carrier won't complain about that. But nowhere, I've read a lot of insurance policies, and nowhere have I seen it say, we pay the average cost to do this work depending on your region based on Xactware. Ever.
Yeah. I'm looking at one right now. It says you hire the contractor. We're not responsible for the quality workmanship of that contractor. But if they disagree with us, have them call us. So that's why I think preempting what they require by way of the insurance companies. If you do disagree, you need to get a hold of not the adjuster, but the claim representative. And if you can, find out if there's anybody that's certified in Xactimate, because again, are you using the software as intended, or are you, bastardizing it, so to speak? Because you can. Either side can play them against, play the game of misrepresenting and misusing the software. That's why sticking with the white papers and what's been defined as the intended use of the software is so important.
I could not agree more. At the end of the day, look, both sides could do all sorts of manipulation with Xactimate, and some manipulation is okay and some is not. You can obviously manipulate the price list to the extent you are putting in an accurate price when the price list is inaccurate, right? And that could be either direction. But with that said, like alterations to Xactimate within the guidelines of what the end user license agreement and the white paper suggest is ultimately what's key. And it sounds like it's what's made you successful in the supplementing world.
Absolutely. Yeah. All they need is a reason to pay. I used to be an adjuster, so all I needed was a reason to pay. I would get docked sometimes on my metrics to get my bonus at the end of the year because I forgot to include that close-up photo. I had one, I think it was in a basement, and there was a water leak, overhead water leak in the basement, and they had stained the chair rail, right? Stained and sealed, wasn't painted. And it's because the water leak, it created a stain inside of this, so you couldn't use that board anymore. Well, they docked me because I didn't have a close-up photo. I had a far away photo. So photo evidence is really critical in this. I would say get a far away photo, get a midstream photo, and get a close-up. And that'll tell the story. Again, it's a narrative, right? We replaced this piece of flashing because it's damaged. It got holes in it. If I bought a new piece of flashing and took it home, put holes in, tried to return it, what would they say?
I've been to classes where they call it the rule of 3 yards, 3 feet, 3 inches, like the photos, I don't think those measurements are exactly right. There's a lot of things that you wouldn't want to take a photo of 3 inches away, but I understood the argument and it made sense. Todd, this has been awesome. We are literally about to be out of time, which is wild because we didn't even cover any of the things I wanted to, but you had so much to offer. Yeah, we might have to have you back so we can talk about some of this because there's so many good things that aren't Xactimate related, but You made the mistake of mentioning the white papers, and that is like something I geek out on. So I had an opportunity.
I will send you the critical ones that I see that every contractor needs to be educated in. And then, their crew needs to be educated too. So coaching and education is critical to this industry. And to the extent that they're educated, they're going to be more profitable, and organized, more profitable.
I could not agree more. Todd, before you go, I do have to ask you though, what does it mean to you to level up?
I think to level up is to get on board with what's necessary for a job. I mean, you don't have the education and knowledge, you can't be profitable. You have to be organized and ready to go. Tool up and level up.
I love it. Todd, thank you so much for joining us. You've been amazing to have.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it, Gail. Have a good day.
I'd like to thank Todd Beckman for joining us on the show. So much knowledge about Xactimate, Xactware, how this works. In fact, I feel like I need to share this with you. After we went off air, he even shared that as a contractor using Xactimate, you can reach out to them and have it so your estimates automatically go back to Xactimate to add to their price list and increase the prices to something fair. So tons of knowledge there. If you're having trouble with Xactimate, read these white papers. We're going to put some of the links down below and make sure you understand how the tool you use every day actually works so you can get the best results possible for you, your family, and your customers. Follow us on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast player.